Now, as the title suggests for this episode, it's kind of ironic because for the past, I want to say about 2 days, the internet has been a little funky. Cablevision has been out. I mean, I was able to get online, but I wasn't able to stream. Download speeds were greater than upload speeds. And if you want to stream, you need good upload speeds. So, yeah. But that's been resolved. And I want to thank somebody from Optimum for assuring me that it would be done and for just being patient and just for overall being a professional. And thank you very much, Chris. Now, getting into tonight's subject. I almost wasn't going to do this episode because it was getting kind of late. But I figured, what the hell? Suddenly, I got hit with a second wind, and here we are. This is the 96th episode of Drezen Draws. We're inching closer and closer to triple digits. And it's, needless to say, very exciting. Yet, the world itself remains very uncertain. Over the years, there have been people among us who have made an attempt to expose or in some cases even embrace the darker side of life. And Lon Chaney Sr. was one of those people. You probably never heard the name Lon Chaney if you were born, I'd say, after 1960. But let me give you a hand. The Phantom of the Opera, released in 1925, starred the great late actor who is the father of Lon Chaney Jr., who was the Wolfman. Lon Chaney Sr. was not only the first screen version of the disfigured Eric, the Phantom. He was also Quasimodo. He was also He Who Gets Slapped. He was also Tito Beppi in Laugh Clown Laugh. He was also Frosso in West of Zanzibar. He played a lot of quirky, disfigured, and otherwise thoughtful and jealous and otherwise tossed aside people in over 100 films between 1912 and 1930, when he died of throat cancer at the age of 47 after making his first and only talking film. Now, when I first got a hold of Chaney's only sound film, The Unholy Three, released in 1930, I was just so smitten by the sound of his voice that I imitated it in the Lucky Zilla short film Atomics, which is being reissued later this month. But the films that I've seen of Lon Chaney's are just incredible. There is no one like him. If you've never seen a Lon Chaney film, I highly recommend that you do, because it's just, words are so feeble in describing him. You gotta let the man speak for himself, metaphorically speaking. and you'll have to excuse me if I got the sniffles a lot, but I had the COVID test done earlier. If some place is offering it in your area, I highly recommend that you get it, whether you've been exposed or not. Fair warning, it is kind of unpleasant, but if you have half the allergies that I do, you'll be fine. So with that said, let's put on some music. First and foremost, let's try to capture the image of the man, Lon Chaney. Alright. Let me also check my my mic setting. Okay, yeah, it's on what it should be. Chaney was born Leonidas Frank Chaney in Denver, Colorado on April 1 of 1883. And it's in a way a little ironic that he would end up becoming a major star in silent movies because his parents were deaf mutes. Married a stage actress named Cleva Creighton, who was very disturbed, very jealous, and had a very hard time. In fact, she even tried to kill herself on stage. I believe for a time she was committed to an institution, and Lon took up the duties of being a single father to little Creighton, who would become Lon Chaney Jr. Now that particular episode of Chaney's life was depicted in the 50s by James Cagney in the film Man of a Thousand Faces, which is how my father had learned of Chaney. And for years, when I started taking an interest in movies, in particular silent films, he's like, yeah, you should watch the movie Man of a Thousand Faces. It's about Lon Chaney, and James Cagney plays Lon Chaney. And so I happened to see that film after seeing the small handful of Chaney films that I was able to get. Of course, the big one being Phantom, which how can you not get a copy of Phantom of the Opera? It is just so easy to find. It's more widely available than Nosferatu. As you can see, I'm having a lot of difficulty drawing this dude. Some of Chaney's best-known films, and best films overall, were his collaborations with Todd Browning, who was an actor and director, a child of the sideshow theater growing up, and a considerable proponent of the macabre. Those dark, seedy elements of humanity that don't often get exposed or even explored, but are there, brooding, dreaming, very jealously even, about being a part of society and never being accepted. Sarah Karloff, daughter of Boris Karloff, told the story of how her father shared a cab ride with Chaney one night. He was a struggling actor at one time. Anyone can believe that the great Boris Karloff was struggling, but you know, he was. And he asked Chaney for advice, and the advice that Chaney gave him was, find something that no one else is doing. And you've got to jump start on something that you will be able to do better than anyone. After all these eyes, man, these eyes are killing me. Amazing that this extremely talented man right here only lived to 47. This larger than life person who could play any role. Gave 110% effort every day, no matter who he was working for. Especially considering his very icy working relationship with Phantom director Rupert Julian, who was an egotistical prick. One of the people, at least from the research I've done, that really got on Chaney's bad side. It got to the point where cinematographer Charles Van Anger had to serve as a messenger between director Julian and actor Chaney. There's also a rumor that Chaney directed a few scenes in Phantom because director Julian was fired at one point, and direction was turned over to longtime comedy director Edward Sedgwick, who would later direct some of Buster Keaton's features at MGM until Keaton's contract expired in, I think it was 1934. And he was just, we'll talk about Buster Keaton another time. But he made a lot of mistakes. Turner owns the rights to several of Chaney's later films, including The Unknown from 1927, Mockery and The Monster from 1927 and 1925, respectively. Don't know if I mentioned Laugh Clown Laugh. I may have, but that's... That I would have to say is my favorite Chaney film. There's also non-makeup roles such as Tell It to the Marines, and well, it's really one of the lesser films in my opinion, but still important too. Is the development of his overall screen persona, The Ace of Hearts from 1921. One of the star-making roles for Chaney, particularly in his desire to just explore every single facet of a character from top to bottom, from soup to nuts. What happened? It's hard to. It's really hard to judge the Miracle Man from 1919 with today's perspective, because that film unfortunately is mostly lost. So, I mean, it made a lot of money in 1919, but there's the penalty from the following year, which I don't know what kind of business it did, but it certainly put Chaney on the map as, I wouldn't say King of Hollywood, but a name you could bank on. I mean, Sam Goldwyn took notice. If you don't know who Sam Goldwyn is, look it up. Oh. By the way, if you like what you see here, you can hire me. I do birthday parties, corporate events, and things of that nature. I also have a board game that's still plentifully available. Only put some money in my pocket. So unemployment is slow. More on that later on. I'm debating whether or not I want to ink this, because the idea here is to kind of take this figure. Here's what we're gonna do. Here's what we're gonna do. Now, only because there are not enough hours in a day. I would just love to be able to kind of a tribute poster where I draw his profile, just like how I'm drawing it now. I think I wanted that picture. But this way I can see any of your comments. Computer's getting a little testy right now. Trying to get too many things. This image is striking as it is. Of Lon is grainy as hell. This is a headshot from 1923. I don't know if it was a studio headshot. I mean, he wasn't really going on auditions as much as I can surmise. I'm not going to try to assume what color eyes he had because no color photos of him exist as far as I know, and I'm not counting the ball mask sequence that was photographed in the two-color Technicolor process in Phantom of the Opera. I don't know if that works. Now this sort of isn't Chaney's first appearance on Double D. Trying to think, it was last year, the year before. It might have been end of 2018. I did Universal Monstars, and funny enough, I got the most votes for the Phantom of the Opera. I guarantee that a bulk of my viewers at the time who were under the age of 40 wouldn't have known that the Phantom of the Opera, the original Lon Chaney Phantom of the Opera, was a Universal picture. Now, I want to give a special shout out to, I forget what the hell the name of the group is. Let me just find it. And I'm going to yell at Nelson Hughes for creating a group name that's so long. It's called, and I'm going to put a link to it in the comments. The Silent and Early Sound Films of Universal Studios, 1910s to the 1930s. That kind of got my juices flowing again, you know, for silent films, because since 2001, I have regularly watched silent movies. The first one I ever saw was the 1927 Oscar-winning film Wings, starring Buddy Rogers, Clara Bow, Richard Arlen, and a very young Gary Cooper, under the direction of one of the all-time great directors, William Wild Bill Wellman. I didn't see the Phantom of the Opera for about another 2 years, because I wanted to see if I could get a hold of a good version of it. I didn't even know about the scenes in that film that were photographed in Technicolor. Now, for those of you who are curious about silent films, haven't seen one, maybe looking to give them a shot, I do not recommend starting with Phantom, and I'll tell you why. And this is just me being the nerd that I am. Phantom of the Opera is a fascinating film. I think even more fascinating than the film itself is the making of the film. And just what a, pardon my French, clusterfuck that it was. It took about, 2 years of production. It was pretty expensive for 1925, but not the most expensive movie made at that time. But it was expensive for Universal, who was constantly just scraping by. And while they did produce some very well-made films occasionally, they mostly stuck to low-budget westerns and comedies. They had several comedy units, including LKO, Joker, and Century Comics, just to name a few. But at least once or twice a year, the studio allocated a certain amount of money in its yearly budgets for what they called Universal Jewels, or when they made The Hunchback of Notre Dame in 1923, Super Jewel. This is something that Phantom of the Opera fit the bill of, as it was indeed a super jewel. I think the overall cost of the film, once with all the pieces in and the advertising, it was somewhere around $650,000, and it grossed $2 million in 1925. However, it was previewed twice, once in January of 1925 and again in June, and the previews, from what I read, were absolute disasters. There was a wedding scene that was cut. There was a whole bunch of other business in the opera house with other characters that ended up on the cutting room floor. A lot of stories that are left very empty, open-ended, for no reason other than the fact that they just had to make up their minds what was going to go in the final picture and what wasn't, and having to deal with a maniac like Rupert Julian. Rupert Julian was an actor also. I think in about 1918 he started a film, I think, that was called the Kaiser. Nelson Hughes or Steve Massa. If you want to chime in with the correct title of the film, please do, because I'm probably getting it wrong, because I have not been studying this shit as much as you guys have been. Steve Massa, I believe, is one of the librarians at the New York Public Library. Brilliant man, really knows his stuff. And Nelson Hughes is a friend and mostly a comedy historian, but we talk about Lon Chaney frequently. And Marvel Comics illustrator Grant Mead and I definitely share a passion for the greatness that is Lon Chaney. So, hey, Grant, if you happen to be watching this and you know something I don't, by all means, man, chime on in. Chime on in. I think there's always more to learn about these guys. These guys and girls of the early days of motion pictures. That's actually starting to look like Lon. It's not perfect, but it's better than than what I had earlier. Now, one of the most interesting facets of Lon Chaney was his not only superb acting chops, but he was a brilliant makeup artist. Something that kind of disappeared with him when he died, because it took the magic of several men to replace Lon's creative genius. So, I mean, if he was playing a monster in a film, he came up with the makeup. I mean, he would converse with the directors and the producers and whoever was pertinent then, and then he would basically work out the details of the makeup on his own. What I can tell you from what I've learned, and there's a documentary on some of the Universal Legacy DVD sets called Universal Horror. I think it's on the Dracula one. Definitely see that documentary. It's really something. But they describe the apparatuses that Chaney made for Phantom, and just to give you an idea. I gotta go back to the Lon Chaney images, don't I? Give me a second. Let's see if I can get a front-facing image. Okay, this is good enough. All right, we're gonna take a break from the drawing. See this right here? This thing right here, when there's some hooks right here that that are covered by all this. I think it's called collodion, but it's a whole bunch of this weird crap that you don't want to put on your skin, but he did anyway because it achieved this look. And he's got hooks going up into his nostrils, and I mean, this thing made him bleed like crazy. He could only wear it for just a few minutes at a time. And I can't imagine all the other different versions of this that he went through before he got this look, but he kind of based the look of the Phantom on the scarred World War I veterans of just less than a decade earlier. So, paying tribute to them in more ways than one, I mean, depending on what your perspective is on that. But he did his research. I mean, if Chaney were alive today, you know, with the internet, I mean, shit, he'd be all over trying to learn new things and develop new monsters. At least that's what I think he would be doing. I could be wrong. Details are a little sketchy on this one, but don't have another storm tonight. Because quite honestly, I don't want to wait another 2 days before I have internet again. Because I'm looking to do maybe a handful more episodes either this weekend or this coming week. But I want to try to get them all out of the way before the end of the month. And then my friends, you will have the details you need for when the 100th episode is going to be. But I couldn't do more and more shows that were just throwaways, that were things that I didn't want to do, or that I maybe wasn't as excited about. But then I started thinking about Lon Chaney, and I'm like, you know, the dude deserves a little bit more than what he's gotten. Genius. Of course, we're not done yet. Now, we've already done Phantom, so you know, I think we're maybe... I was thinking about doing Phantom and... I was thinking about doing just the Phantom face, Unmasked, and Quasimodo. I think I want to do Quasimodo and something else. I'm not sure yet. I'm not taking suggestions because that's not how the show works. I'm open for commissions though, so if you would like to see Lon Chaney as whatever role except for a stereotype, and by all means, message me or email me at drezenmedia@gmail.com. So, let's see. Oh, this is good. Here, I'm gonna save you. We're gonna move you aside. And I gotta figure this out for next time. I really hope those aren't more idiots in the neighborhood that are setting off fireworks. It's not the 4th of July anymore, you know? So he's got much thicker eyebrows than we see here. And we're not going to go strictly by the makeup, because it might have been a lot simpler in appearance. And revealed a little bit more by today's technology to be maybe not quite as impressive. But it's Lon Chaney, so I mean, we can forgive just about anything that that high definition technology tries to take away from us. So that's one of the things that I hate about HD. You start to notice certain imperfections. Now, I mean, Disney is proving to be somewhat of a pain when it comes to the over restoration of material. Oh yeah, that's right. Now, in my early days of animating, I took some inspiration from Chaney's Quasimodo and redesigned briefly Lucky Zilla to account for this this particular style, as it were. Now, of all the different versions of Hunchback of Notre Dame that I've seen, I wouldn't call the film itself, the 1923 Hunchback of Notre Dame, a masterpiece, but I dare not suggest what the film would have been like had it not been for Lon Chaney's performance. His Quasimodo, I think, is the most believable. His Quasimodo is angry and just dismissive of the outside world. He wants nothing to do with it because of how he is treated by his fellow man, by the man who raised him, Jehan. He's got a job in a church as a bell ringer. What does he need with humanity? Never give a damn about him. Let me just see something. I want to make sure that the yeah, we're still going. Oh yeah, we're still going. Oh wow, yeah, we've glad that we reached some people. Makes me happy. I'm gonna keep at this hair. How are we gonna do this? I'm not coloring any of this because it'll kind of be pointless, and I think it would ruin the spirit of the silent film on which it's based, which is very much not in color. Tinted, but not in color. This is the, yeah, this is what I'm talking about here. Okay, I'm gonna throw this out. There's just so much sincerity in his performances as Quasimodo, even though he kind of starts out as very vulgar and unfriendly, but you can see why he is, because he's not respected. He's not given the time of day. He's looked upon as subhuman. And he, not Esmeralda, is the heart of the picture. But not to diminish the role that Patsy Ruth Miller played as Esmeralda. You know, she's like the first and perhaps only one that actually sees it. Which is kind of cool. I'm not going to give away the end. I mean, you see it. It's so worth it. But in all brutal honesty, as good as the film is, I wouldn't call it a masterpiece, but holy crap, Chaney is the movie. I mean, Disney made their version of it. That was good. My favorite of the three film versions that I've seen is perhaps the 1939 version with Charles Laughton and Maureen O'Hara under the direction of William Dieterle, who would later go on to direct Paul Muni in The Life of Emile Zola. Really fascinating film that won the Best Picture Oscar for 1937. Now, while Hunchback is, I think, technically in the public domain, and it is kind of widely available, it's just not as widely available as Phantom. I'd recommend, seeking it out. It's not terribly hard to find. There's not a shit ton of versions of it like there are of Phantom, with varying levels of quality. The version that I had for the longest time, and I might actually have a better version somewhere, either on my computer that I bought from Prime Video or whatever. But I had a sound reissue of Phantom that I think was from the 40s. I want to say I could be totally wrong. It's like Phantom, Hunchback kind of went into receivership when the Laemmle family lost the studio in the mid-1930s. And by 1947, the rights to the films had expired and were not renewed by Universal. In fact, there's a really sad story that Nelson Hughes told me about how Carl Laemmle Jr., who's the son of studio founder Carl Laemmle Sr., they destroyed the negatives to Universal's silent films in 1929. Which sounds crazy because they were still making silent films, or at least part sound films, silent films to some degree during that year. So you have to wonder, like, why? Well, they didn't really see any value in them. But what's really fascinating and hypocritical about that is that same year, 1929, they reissued the Phantom of the Opera as a part sound film. The 1929 version of Phantom is the version that is most commonly available today. No complete version of the 1925 film is known to exist. To the best of my knowledge, I was reading that a few years ago, some more Technicolor footage from the Phantom had shown up. Where I don't remember the details, but that's worth looking into. I don't know if there are any plans to bring it to home video or to film festivals, but you know, when this pandemic is over, I'm curious to see how the film industry is going to come back, especially on the festival circuit, because you know, being a comic book artist, I've been affected by the pandemic in more ways than one. My job was eliminated due to COVID, and I was printing comic books for a living. So I would like to think that, you know, there's an opportunity for me to go back there when things get a bit more settled, but who's to really say? It's not perfect. It's not 1,000% there. But it's better than what I started with. Chaney wore a 20+ pound cement block on his back while playing Hunchback. It might have weighed actually more than that. But he did it throughout filming, and he was a trooper. 3 years earlier, for the penalty, he had to contort his legs because he was playing essentially a legless man. The character was named Blizzard. I don't know, it's been a few years since I saw the film, so I cannot recall whether or not the character had a proper name. He may have, he may not, but I'd have to see it again. But it is available on home video from Kino Lorber. I believe it's on Blu-ray. See if there's anything else that I'm missing. show you the picture I'm using as reference. My computer will cooperate. Now this image right here appeared in, I think it was Nickelodeon magazine, around 1996, when Disney's Hunchback of Notre Dame had hit theaters. And they were exploring other film versions of Hunchback, which I ended up seeing only because of the magazine. But this image right here made me available made me aware of who Lon Chaney was. And because my mother took a course at Malloy College back in the late 70s, the course was in silent films, by the way. She was able to identify this as Lon Chaney. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to take these guys out of the equation and bring this guy to center stage. Save over this. I think what we're going to do take a very short break while I try to figure out, well, this wasn't very hard. Okay, now this right here, whoa, that'll haunt your nightmares. There's a Chaney film that hasn't been seen in quite a while. It's called London After Midnight. It was released in 1927. It was a successful film, but it disappeared. One of the last known prints of the film was destroyed in a vault fire at MGM in 1967. Among some of the other casualties of that vault fire were the original nitrate negatives of the Tom and Jerry cartoons. You might be thinking that can't be possible. I mean, it's Tom and Jerry. Like, Tom and Jerry. Well, film preservation can only go so far. You know, it's got to be... some film just has to be stored properly, otherwise it's gonna bite the dust one day. And this film certainly did. Oh yeah, that's right, you couldn't actually see. Yeah, there we go. There's a face that'll haunt your nightmares. Forget the character's name, but Chaney actually plays a dual role in London. Plays that of a professor and the creature you just saw. Imagine wearing those dentures for about, I don't know, 5 to 6 weeks of shooting. Some painful shit. But he did it. Like I said, Chaney was a trooper. He died way before his time. And had he lived, there is speculation that he would have been first in line to play the immortal Dracula, who was immortalized quite well by the late, great Bela Lugosi. Chaney's Dracula, some speculate, would have been much like his performance in London After Midnight, where he played both a detective and a vampire. It was also speculated, I don't know how true this is, that he would have portrayed both the role of Dracula and that of Professor Van Helsing in what eventually became the actual film version of Dracula. But that role was filled by the great Edward Van Sloan. I love the teeth on this character. Those eyes, yeah. First time I saw this, and I learned about, what it was, and also having seen the photo recreation that was done from the original script, I was just like, I would love to be able to see this. But to quote a friend who will remain nameless, because I don't know if he wants his name attached to this quote, but one of these days the film might turn up, and everyone who is waiting to see it will be very disappointed. There was this one film critic of the time who described the walk of Lon's character in the film to be almost dead on to Groucho Marx, the duck walk. And I mean, it's like, on one hand I say, bullshit, that's Lon Chaney you're talking about. Groucho Marx or any of that, but whatever, haters gonna hate, as it were. There's some footage that turned up, I want to say in the 70s, that was mistaken at first for footage from London After Midnight, but it was actually a costume test by makeup expert Rick Baker. And that it was a hoax, and it maybe wasn't very appreciated. London After Midnight was actually remade in 1935 as Mark of the Vampire. I forget who's in that. I don't really care. I think Bella's in it. I think Lugosi's in it. But I could be wrong. I'll see it eventually. But honestly, I hope that London After Midnight turns up first. I'd much rather see that, because, I mean, damn. Let's be real. Who wouldn't want to see a Lon Chaney film turn up that's been lost for 90 years? I can't think of one silent film fan that doesn't want more Chaney films to show up. Chaney's films are just bursting with so much intrigue. The closest thing that I've come to seeing as a mediocre or a bad Chaney film would probably have to be The Ace of Hearts. It drags. It's not particularly interesting, but I mean, Lon being in it kind of helps. He doesn't really do much in it, but he sure as hell has plenty to do with the resolution of the story. Rumors persist to this day that there is a 16mm print of London After Midnight somewhere in the possession of some guy who wanted an exorbitant amount of money for it. Truthfully, you can never really put a price on history. I mean, you can, but that doesn't mean that you're going to get it. There's a guy who had a copy of the 1910 Frankenstein, and he refused to sell it to any of the archives. Eventually, I think that one went to hell, and another copy was found. At least I could be misinterpreting. Could be misinterpreting this, but that's at least what I gathered. digital artist alive that has to redo his damn signature. Alright, so there it is. Let's combine this with the other two. I think it's only fair. There we go. I think we're about there. I'm glad I did this. It's not perfect, but when you're home all the time and you're not really getting much of any place, you still have to be yourself. You have to live each day to the fullest. And you have to better yourself as best you can with the tools that you have available. But for what it's worth, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad that you see this. And I enjoy doing this. Not just for you, but for me. So, with that said, I'm going to end the episode. I'm going to wish you good health and to stay Drezen. Be well, everybody.